Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
Like any good local radio program, we are covering all the issues with the roads and the weather and the school closures and federal government closures, all that stuff for you. But unlike other programs, we're also covering the news and events around the world and in our nation that you care most about. Also at 8:05, we'll hear from Erica Donald, School Choice Week. That kicks off this week. It's Larry O'Connor. Cassie Smedley is with us all morning as well. Good morning, Cassie.
Good morning, Larry. Great to be with you.
Absolutely, you bet. And joining us right now, friend of the program and my co-host on, they named the show The Kevin Roberts Show, but we're working on that. I've got a new contract up, but I am the co-host of The Kevin Roberts Show podcast. And by the way, Kevin Roberts, who, by the way, is the other host of The Kevin Roberts Show, appropriately, they named it after him. I might be late getting to the studio for our taping tomorrow because I don't know if you noticed, the roads are like ridiculous out there. So I'm just giving you a heads up.
Yeah, I haven't ventured beyond our driveway, and that's because our road in our neighborhood is so bad. So, maybe we can do something virtually, Larry. I'm just glad that you let me join you on the Kevin Roberts Show.
Yes, right. Well, you know what? It was a tough call, but I figured you're the boss. Kevin, thanks for joining us because I'm watching all these events unfold. I'm seeing the obvious organized effort here to undermine ICE in Minnesota and Border Patrol, but also undermine the rule of law. Either way, ironically and Orwellian-like fashion, under the guise of saying no one is above the law, while they literally want to dismantle the apparatus to enforce the immigration laws. And it says to me that something bigger is at play here. This is not Kent State and, hippies protesting the Vietnam War. When you look at this from your wise eyes, what do you see?
Well, I see two things. Number one, on the Orwellian point, that's exactly what's happening. And they're accusing the political right, in particular the administration, which is trying to restore the rule of law by eliminating these sanctuary cities and states, of the very thing they're guilty of. But the second thing is that there is a massive network, to tell you something you and your audience already knows, a massive network of these radical leftists who have been really active in D.C. Those of us who happen to be conservative and happen to like conservative policy have been the targets of this network in Washington. Well, all of those protests have gone virtually silent in D.C. because those people literally have moved to Minneapolis. My colleague Mike Gonzalez has done more research on the extensive funding of that network than anyone on the planet. And Mike over the weekend was telling me that the dots to connect here across the entire international Soros network back to these people in Minneapolis, including the mayor of Minneapolis and the governor of Minnesota, are very clear. That's what we're up against. And I have to tell you, to sum up here, Larry, even though I'm an eternal optimist, I'm very concerned about the success of these people in undermining the rule of law.
Well, funny you should say that, because my follow-up question, we just had Joe DeGeneva on 30 minutes ago. He said, time for ICE to pull out, strategic retreat, let Minneapolis devolve into madness, go to a state or a city that is welcoming and cooperates and show that rest of the country how it's done. And I'm looking at headlines now. Get this. The New York Times, the Washington Post, and the Wall Street Journal and the New York Post. When was the last time those four agreed on something? But Kevin Roberts, they all agree that it's time for the Trump administration to pull back its efforts in Minneapolis. I reading between the lines, is that what you're advising as well?
No. In fact, we're advising the opposite. All of my colleagues at Heritage and I know this is a surprise, disagree with the newspapers. and the reason is that would we have said that in Little Rock in the 1950s? Would we have said that in Mississippi in the 1960s? No. The federal government, of course, maintained their presence in those places because of the rule of law and because it was imperative that they protect what the local government and state government were unwilling to protect, which is American citizens. We have to understand we still have millions of illegal aliens, all of whom broke the law, who ought to be deported. All ICE is doing is targeting the people who are felons. These are the known felons. And so it's really important, I think, that the administration stands strong here and understand they and ICE are not the villains. The villains are people like Tim Walz and the mayor of Minneapolis and the people who are bringing guns to protests that law enforcement, of course, are trying to impose the rule of law on.
Well, and no disagreement there in terms of the mission and that we have to stay true to upholding the law and the mission. But different from the 50s and the 60s is that now you've got social media. Now you have this very this monetized movement. I mean, it's a whole paid movement to push out their images that are just flashed across every Instagram feed of every mom in America, targeted by design to get people to get squishy on this issue. And it's showing in the polls. So at some point, do you make a change, even if it's a PR campaign? And then how do you even do that? But does something have to change?
Yeah, it's a really fair question, Cassie, because as you indicate in your question, the two aspects of this are, on the one hand, the substance, the reality of it, where we can talk about the rule of law and best practices of law enforcement. But the other aspect, which you highlight so well, is the PR side. And of course, we would encourage the administration to do an even better job on the PR side, because in this age of social media, for that matter, in this age when formerly conservative newspapers like the Wall Street Journal are parroting leftist talking points, that the administration and its allies on the outside have to do an excellent job of convincing the American people that in spite of this well-paid campaign to demonize ICE agents, amplified by really questionable rhetoric, to be polite about it, by the governor and the mayor, it's got to be offset by a sustained, very good PR campaign that explains to the American people why this is important.
Speaking with Kevin Roberts, Heritage Foundation, and if I can just pivot a little bit, I'd love for your reflection on President Trump and the American presence in Davos at the World Economic Forum, usually not a very friendly platform for conservative America First policies, but it seems like they reset the table on a lot of those conversations through their efforts.
Man, I just think that what a sign that this is, in fact, America's golden age. Can you imagine a president and a few key members of his cabinet, all of whom are very articulate, to give them some credit as well, completely upending the table and resetting it. And we weren't surprised at Heritage that the president did that, because we know the president as y'all do, but also because we encounter these European officials who call themselves centrists, who simply have never been able to understand in the last few years that Americans are tired of subsidizing the expansion of their welfare state and the nonsense of net zero, all the while being on the receiving end of these arrogant European officials wagging the finger that we must send hundreds of billions of dollars to defend them. The president was just fantastic there. You know that I was at Davos a couple of years ago and got in and out as quickly as I could because I thought there was no hope. But ultimately, the president showed that there is. And actually, I would connect this to the Minnesota situation. Where there is moral clarity, and the president articulates that, he can convince not just Europeans, but also the American people of the right course. And I would just encourage him to continue to do that.
Well, and I'd love to follow up on that because, there are going to be a lot of voices. You call them establishment voices, call them, they like to harken back to Reagan, but I don't think Reagan would agree with them. But certain voices who identify with the Republican Party and certain parts of the conservative commentariat who will say that the approach that we just took at Davos is completely wrong, Dr. Roberts, because we need to lead the world and build these coalitions of the new order, and we need to be able to work with our NATO partners and work with the EU and advance to fight against the common, all of the rhetoric that they throw out there. Personally, I look at that and say, okay, that sounds nice, but if you look at the last 30, 40 years, how exactly have American interests been upheld and looked after? Europe is still lecturing us and wagging their fingers at us. And, oh, by the way, last I looked, Western civilization is not really being supported in all those European countries. It's got a very different look right now.
So true, Larry. Those European countries, with a few exceptions, are the ones undermining Western civilization, especially because they've given away their sovereignty to the European Commission. But let's just hang on your point about history a little bit. Don't you think if Reagan were alive, he would have gone there and done something similar that Trump did? Don't you think if Margaret Thatcher were alive,
considering he called Soviet Union the evil empire during his speech in the UK and then went to Berlin and demanded that the wall get torn down, he was kind of audacious that way, Reagan was.
There's so much continuity between Reagan and Trump. It's a shame that a few people on the right don't understand that. But think about the third member of that great triumvirate of the 1980s, in addition to Reagan and Thatcher, Pope John Paul II. Now, I would think that the Pope probably wouldn't have shown up at Davos, but had he would have framed things as pro-human and anti-human. And I think, with his gentility, but also his moral clarity, he would have said, your net zero programs in Europe, which always cause at least several hundred Europeans to die in winter because they don't have access to natural gas, are anti-human, to say nothing of the Malthusian objectives of that net zero nonsense. So we have to understand that Trump is his own man. He deserves a lot of credit for amplifying the new conservative movement, but there is a lot of continuity between him and Reagan.
If I may add, Dr. Roberts, I think St. John Paul the Great also would have been unequivocally and unabashedly anti-Marxist in any remarks he gave to the World Economic Forum. That is Catholic doctrine, after all. We shall leave it there. But this is a good preview to the next couple of episodes of the Kevin Roberts Show. So thanks for helping me out with my show prep here, Kevin. Appreciate it.
Larry O'Connor, doctor of the church. It's so good to spend some time with you.
I got to get behind Antonin Scalia for that one. Thank you, sir.